Welcome to the Provisionist Perspective. Today, we're going to be talking to you about Romans 8, verses 28 to 31. And this is part of a series that we have that's called Demystifying. We've done a Demystifying predestination, Demystifying election. And as you'll notice, Eric wasn't able to be here with us tonight. And so I invited Brother Brian last minute, as I'm sure he gets a lot of invites from us, spontaneous provisionists, to just hop on. And he's flexible with us and with me, so appreciate him coming on today. Do you want to just introduce yourself for any new viewers, Brother Brian, and say who you are?
Yeah, for anybody new, I'm just Brian Wagner, friend of Drew. Been friends online for a number of years now, and thankful to be part of the provisionist movement. Well, we have the right name recognition. I mean, you can't do better than provisionist. You know, it's not named after a man. You know, it's named after God's love. So that can't beat that. So I'm glad to be a part. I teach on the college level. Been doing it for 20 years now. Have some experience in youth work and missions, church planning, and pastoring. Thankful for the Lord putting up with me all these years and being able to serve Him.
Yeah, that's how it feels sometimes. I feel like with each age, with each year, I think, oh, you put up with me that year, Lord, thank you. I appreciate it. Your grace is great. Yeah. And I'm happy to be part of this movement too, the provisionist movement. And I do really like that about it. I mean, maybe it's a minor detail, but it's not Arminianism or Calvinism, it's provisionism.
Or Lutheranism, right?
I do like it. Yeah, there's a ton of them out there. And it kind of surprises me too, and I know that people don't necessarily choose their labels or whatever. And a lot of people that would subscribe to certain views would just say, don't call me that, but this is what I most closely associate with. But in regards to Paul's exhortation, his warning, don't say I'm of such and such, and yet we call ourselves. But if I get it. I'm not saying you shouldn't call yourself a Calvinist or an Arminian or whatever.
I am. I'm saying that. So Drew, right. We already are disagreeing.
That's good. Healthy disagreement among brethren is appreciated. So today we're cracking in, and with any luck, the thumbnail right now talks about the golden chain of redemption, as it's commonly called, and this unbreakable chain of redemption. And probably by the time many of you are watching this, the thumbnail will be changed. We'll talk about synergy. So we're going to crack in today to talk about synergy, and we're going to talk about not just that, but move into some of the foreknown and this allegedly kind of sequential chain. Is it sequential? What is it? And so I hope this is beneficial to you today. And I'm just going to put the text up on the screen, and I'll read it, and then we'll kind of talk about it. I don't have a heaps of agenda. I do have one item on the agenda today, and we'll get to that. It connects to the synergy thing. And so here we go. Let's put this on the screen, and then we can talk about it. I got to stop this screen. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, chat. Send us if you have a question at any stage. By the way, it's really helpful if you write question in all caps or at Provisionist Perspective, so that we can read that, because sometimes it can be real hard to keep up with. So this is the focus passage today. We know that all things. This is Romans chapter 8, verse 28 down to verse 30. I said 31. I think I might have to change that in the title as well, but it says, we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. Those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. So this is the first verse that I want to take a look at. And you might notice in the thumbnail, the guy doing this, that's from a scene in a movie. And I'll show you a tweet that I put out to kind of kick off this conversation. We love a good tweet, by the way. Follow us on the socials. We're at ProvisionistP on X/Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days. And I think if you do facebook.com/provisionist perspective, that'll take you to our page on there as well. So let me see if I can find this meme. We'll see if Brother Brian appreciates it. I don't, he's not in the Twitter sphere, so he's probably missed.
Hey, I'm old. I want you to remind you, I'm old.
Facebook.
I can be crotchety and argue with you because that's just I've earned the right.
Yeah. Hey, I like a good discussion. I like a good argument, good brotherly pushback. I mean, we've discussed many things through the years, Brother Brian. We appreciate you and your copy and pastes. Those are always really useful. I should probably close that. That was my messages up. All right. So this is the meme. I think Chris Fisher made this meme, by the way, for those of you who know, a friend of the podcast. And I wrote here, the very passage that some Christians use to teach that everything is predetermined actually has the word synergy in it. And so here's the passage. This is from the New Testament for Everyone version. We know, in fact, that God works all things together for good to those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. And here's that word. I'm going to butcher it. Synergeo. And it's to be a fellow worker, that is cooperate, help, work with, work together. And there's this guy with the synergy hands holding on there. Brother Brian is he's a bit of an expert, as Daddy Pig likes to say. We watch a lot of Peppa Pig in the house, and then he says, I'm a bit of an expert. Brother Brian's a bit of an expert with Greek. He teaches it anyways, so he needs to be a little bit of an expert to be able to teach it. So he can help us out some with this word. Do you want to talk a little bit about this passage and kind of how it's seen? I have a passage from a book here that I'll bring up.
Yeah, so the choice is how to take the working together. What's the subject? And I think there's a textual issue, if I remember correctly. So is it God working together with everything, or is God working everything together? Is I think the choice. Maybe it's not a textual issue. I'm just looking right now real quick. But those are the two translations that are usually given, that, the all things, is the all things a nominative or a genitive, accusative? So is he working all things together, or is all things working together? Maybe that's the best way of putting it. You have to make a choice.
And so you're saying that you have to choose here as to whether God is the subject of the verb working together, all things.
The verb is just third person, right? The verb is just third person singular, so it's he, she, or it. So there's no nominative. There is a panta, which is the word all, but the spelling of panta can be nominative or accusative. So it can be the subject or the object. So it's either he is working all things, or all things are working together.
Okay. And because it's a working together thing there, that's, if you said all things are working, then that would maybe be like what does that mean? But it's all things are working together, or it could be anyways. And
it still ends up with God being the overseer of those things working together. I think either way you look at it.
Sure.
And that's why he's going to go into the next verse and basically say, here's how he's going to work it all together for a good ending for those that are called, those that love him.
Yeah, it's interesting because a number of people, I'm trying to find this quote here. It doesn't appear to be popping up.
And really, probably the bigger argument for those that are determinists are the ones that want to use the word called to mean a special group. So all things are only working together for good for them. And
which is interesting because the context, the immediate context would demand that, because the antecedent there, or the I don't know what to call it. I can't use all the fancy Greek, grammar terms, but it's talking about work together for good to those that love God, specific, like for a limited specific group of people, it seems. So
yeah. And so I think you really then have to back up and look at the word called and how do you become one of the called. And I think, the choice you have to make to use the word called to mean named or labeled instead of invited. Only the special ones that got invitations, the irresistible invitations.
Yeah. I don't know why this search is not happening. I really wanted to share here it is. I don't know why that didn't work. Okay, here we go. So I will put this up here. This is from a missions. It's called, Brother Brian, maybe you've heard of this book. It's called God's Strategy in Human History, and there's like a volume 1 and volume 2. And
Marsden,
so Marsden and Forster, I think is their names. And so here's what they say. I find this interesting. I know, Brother Brian, you tend to disagree with this, but I'm just kind of offering some different options here that provisionistic type people have put forward. So Romans 8:28 is an important. Can you guys see this? Is this up on the screen? Okay, cool. Romans 8:28 is an important verse to help us understand when suffering arises. We should not say everything happens for a reason. God knows what he's doing, or it's all part of God's bigger picture. You guys have heard us push back on that infamous sort of episode X/Twitter exchange surrounding God is in control and how we just feel like that's unhelpful and don't say it and so on. Go watch the episode. Instead, we can pray, God, show me how you want me to work together with you to bring good from these circumstances. However, different Bible translations have radically different interpretations of this verse, and some obscure its meaning. So in KJV, all things work together for good of those who love God. Oh, I've gone too fast. Hold on. There we go.
That's it.
So I'm just going to yada this a little bit. You guys can read the different versions for yourself. Okay. I guess I'll highlight, like, the NASB says God causes all things to work together for the good to those who love God. So this is obviously a little bit of a bias surrounding kind of a causal aspect to this working together thing. And he says these interpretations fall broadly into two camps: those who think all things working together means that God is behind the scenes of all things that happen, even suffering, and those who see God's working as breaking in to bring good even out of bad situations. And so a point in favor of this interpretation too is that Paul's context is about suffering. And so you have to ask yourself the question, is Paul saying, take heart, brothers and sisters, God's behind all of this suffering and bringing it about for his glory and your good? Or is he saying all of this works out and he can redeem all of this for your good in the end, but is not in the minutia behind everything? So that's kind of what the author is saying, is the two different camps that people broadly fall into on this, but you can decide which one's.
So Drew, I have to just confess, I am a determinist.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us more.
I am a determinist. I mean, God is behind everything that is happening and making determinations. So I'm not a pre-creation determinist. I'm a live action determinist.
And if I know you, what you mean by that is God either permits or determines everything.
Yeah, he's permitting or causing, he's working together with, which means including his sovereign allowance of free will to play out as well. But he's doing it for good reasons. I mean, he doesn't ever have bad reasons for doing those things.
Sure.
And it's not all predetermined. It's not all pre-creation determined.
And it's interesting because as a parallel to this, if you look at Job, some people use that passage to, teach everything's been predetermined, etc. And to those that would want to push back on that and would want to say, well, no, this, and this, at the end of the book, God actually takes credit for all of that. So even though we see behind the scenes and stuff like that, and we see that God permitted these things, it does say God brought all of this evil on Job. I mean, that's how it comes across. So, not
He
how it
makes
comes
the
across.
final
That's specifically
determination. And nothing, and I agree with the determinists that are pre-creation determinists, that nothing takes him by surprise, but not in the sense that they think, because they think the story's already written out to work out only
right.
one way. And God himself is locked in to this story. No, God's not locked in, and he knows all the options, all the possibilities that can be chosen for good and different goods, not just one good, different goods that can be permitted or chosen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he can allow evil that he doesn't, he doesn't want, but he permits because he wants the possibility for some good to come out of that situation that could not have happened, and except he allowed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. And so this is, I wanted to jump in a little bit to look at the usage of the word synergy, and then this will segue us into a shameless plug today that I hope you guys won't mind too much, and I hope it's something that interests you all. But it's not commonly used word, So there's 5 uses here in the New Testament, and I think they're really cool. So Mark 16:20 says, let me make this bigger so that you guys can see this, because it's probably quite, oh, my keyboard's a bit funny. Okay, here we go. So we've got Mark 16:20. Hopefully everybody's seeing that okay. Yep. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following. So this is the Lord working with them, the Lord cooperating with them. This word is synergy. So this is biblical synergy that we're talking about here. So if you want to look to the scriptures and find out is synergy biblical, then these are some of the main passages that you would go to look to for that, since it uses the word that synergy comes from, And so
Exactly.
Here is another one, and you'll begin to see a theme that emerges here. Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for the good to them that love God. We've talked about that one. 1 Corinthians 16:16, that you submit yourselves unto such and to everyone that helpeth with us and laboreth. Okay. And then here's 2 Corinthians 6:1. We then, as workers together with him, and then this with him is with God, beseech you that you also not receive the grace of God in vain. Sorry, this is the KJV, and I struggle with the KJV. So this is, again, working together with God. So we've got already 1, 2 explicit usages of working together with God. And I thought that there was another specific usage for that, but here is this is James 2:22. This could be a whole other can of worms, but do you see how faith worked together with his works, and by works is made perfect? So you can see that this is biblical synergy, these passages. And so what I've said is that you audience, Brother Brian, maybe you've heard the phrase, I feel like maybe it was Charles Spurgeon who said it, everyone is born a Christian, but only the grace of God makes him a Calvinist, or something like that. Like, have you heard that?
No.
There's something like that, but I have a phrase that I like to use that's everyone is reborn, you're reborn a Christian, a follower of Christ. But only by the grace of God do you get to be a synergist. Do you get to be a coworker with God? Because
Right.
this is the next level. We're talking about, you're born again, you have new life, you have the righteousness of God dwelling in you by the Spirit, and you have this whole new life ahead of you. But maybe you've not yet started partnering with God and doing what he's doing, and co-working and being a synergist, being a co-laborer with him. And so I think that's kind of like an exhortation and challenge for us all today, is we all want to be joining God with what he's been doing. And one thing, a couple different things that I've been thinking of is, we believe that God draws everyone, that he sufficiently makes himself known to everyone. And so I don't have to wonder, is God at work in this person's life? I already know that he's at work in this person's life, and I just want to join God in that. So our prayer can be, Lord, help me to join in what you're already doing. I know that you love him, her, that you died for her, him. So let me join in on this. I want to co-work with you on this. And then there's another thing that's, by the way, I hope everyone can hear me. I feel like I have a choice of either being really close to the camera and it being kind of awkward, or like backing off a little bit and then you can't hear me as good. So anyways.
No, you're coming through fine. And we're called not just to be saved, we're called to serve. I mean, that's what we're called to do. He saves us to serve him and to co-labor with him. And it's not something that, like puppets on a string. He wants us to, from our heart, Romans 12, 1 and 2, present yourself. You present yourself a living sacrifice. You present your members as instruments of righteousness to serve God. Yeah.
That's right. And so
a lot of Christians don't do that, unfortunately. They make the decision because they don't want to go to hell. They want to trust Jesus to save them from their sins. But they don't make that second. I think it's a lifetime decision of dedication, which baptism is supposed to actually be the representation of that dedication of, here's my life. The old life is buried. My new life is now walking with you. But I've decided to follow Jesus. But a lot of them don't get that connection for some reason. And so they come and sit and soak and sour, as they say. Instead of serving.
Well, this will segue us nicely into our next point, and I won't give you guys my full life story or anything like that, but I, as far as I can tell, have been born again and saved since I was about 8, and I didn't live, the greatest life. I don't think I've ever really shared my testimony here. I won't go into detail here, but I'd like to one day. I want to get Eric and I on here and share our testimony. I feel like that's something important for you guys to hear, because this is a brotherhood. It's not just a podcast. I love hearing people's testimonies. So anyways, for time's sake, not today, sorry. But born again since I was 8. But then around my freshman year of uni, after a little bit of rebellion, junior year of high school and stuff, there was a sort of awakening where I realized, essentially this, like, it's good to invite my friends to church and stuff like that. But I guess I just used to be of the mindset like, oh, they'll come around eventually. And I didn't have as much this understanding of like, there's two paths that you can take here. It's either with God and fellowship with him, or destruction. Like, this is, people are on the path of destruction, and it's only the good news of Jesus and us sharing that with them. And so that kind of began to really turn my world upside down and really made me start to think differently. And that was around the time that I started more personally sharing my faith and stuff. And so that was kind of the becoming a coworker. I had done a little bit here, done some short-term trips and stuff like that before around, the Southeast area, mission trips and things like that, but not really involved myself. And so that was kind of the beginning of my journey into a service more mindset. And so to that end, I have a shameless plug for you guys today of being a synergist and a coworker. We've raised some funds for Rogue Calvinist on our X page. We've raised some funds for our brother Warren McGrew, who's also going to have an increased need here pretty soon, as far as I understand. So keep your eye out for that. His page is givesendgo.com/idolkiller. And today I want to share a project with you that I'm, along with my wife, are piloting. And I'm just going to play the video for you and the link to follow it if you want to click and read more and partner and donate with us. It's givesendgo.com/toys4gospel with the number 4. So I'm just going to put this video up here and watch it. It's about 4 minutes long. It's not too long. And then I'm not going to talk about this at length. This is just going to be a plug, and then we're going to continue on with our broadcast today. But I did want to share this with you guys, and I'll be sharing it with the socials here pretty soon. It's a little bit quiet, so you might want to turn up your volume a bit for this, because I can't make it any louder, unfortunately. Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know us, though I'm sure most of you do, I'm Drew.
And I'm Kirsty.
And we live and work just outside of Madrid in a city called Móstoles for a nonprofit called Puentes de Esperanza, which means Bridges of Hope. It's a pretty cool name. And one of the very first endeavors that we're doing here that Kirsty is essentially pioneering with help from the local church that we're partnered with is a play group. And Kirsty's going to tell you more about what a playgroup is in case you don't know what it's about.
So playgroups are amazing, and actually for me in early motherhood, life-saving. So basically they're run by churches in New Zealand, and they just have a room filled with toys and often a craft activity, a mat time, snack time, and just a chance. The children often play independently because the toys are new and they've got new kids to play with. The mums can sit and chat. And there are volunteers there who they can chat to as well and can help with the kids. It's just a really relaxing time where you can kind of breathe a bit. Your house isn't getting messed up. The playgroup toys are getting messed up. Your kids can get involved with a bit of messy play that you wouldn't normally have at home. Just a really enjoyable group to be a part of, generally speaking. And it's free, and it's something that you don't have to think about. You just turn up, let your kids go crazy, and then you can go home again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody else tidies it up instead of you, like she said.
That's true. We're really excited to set one up here. We're starting from scratch. So we've got a room in our church that's got quite a bit of other furniture in it. So the first thing we need is a massive storage unit to put that kind of stuff in, as well as our toys. We would like to buy really good quality primarily wooden toys that won't break, so that I'm not having to replace them all the time. We also would like to get a good stock of craft activities like paint and crayons and paper and all that, glitter and all that kind of stuff, Play-Doh ingredients to make Play-Doh for the group to kick us off. And we need to buy things like tea and coffee supplies and that kind of stuff. And other things that you would think of, like a mat and a table and chairs for the kids. I can confirm that there is nothing in Móstoles to do with preschoolers right now. And in fact, it's probably been the biggest struggle that I've had since moving here, is entertaining my children, especially in the blistering heat. So I know that this group people will come. It's going to be one of the only things to do with preschoolers in town.
And so that's why it's very much a community service through Puentes de Esperanza, Bridges of Hope. But also it's about the good news of Jesus. And it's about the fact that the playgroup is a fantastic connecting point for people who would otherwise not have Christian friends or not come anywhere near church, because why? It just doesn't cross their minds, right? They're not thinking about these sorts of things. So it's a community service in that it provides stir crazy parents something to do, especially moms here. And it's also just a really great connecting point and opportunity for the gospel. So we're really excited about it. And Kirsty's given you the list of various things that comes along with this. She's been researching it heavily, and it comes out to around $5,000 as a startup for all the toys and different things that she mentioned. So any amount that you can contribute really helps, and we appreciate each one of you. And thank you, and please pray that it's a success and that God blesses it, so that this event that's happening regularly blesses many people with the good news of Jesus as a result. So thank you, and be blessed, and go be a blessing.
Thank you. Bye.
So you can probably detect a few wink, wink, nod, nods of the little provisionism there at the end that I chucked in for good measure. Our theology, convictions, drive, what we do. I've not shared much at all on this platform about what I do, but that's a little window into one thing that we're doing that you can partner with, that you can synergize with us and God in. So again, it's givesendgo.com/toys. 4 gospel, and you can go there. Usually we average on around 1,000 to 2,000 views, and so if everybody gave just a couple of dollars, we'd be well on our way to that. We would really appreciate it, and thank you for that. We're approaching actually 4,000 subscribers, but I think we're trying to get some people that we lost from some different breaks that we took, and I really wanted to broadcast today so that we're building momentum and stuff here, and continue to talk about things and putting out provisionistic content. So that's a link for that. We appreciate it. Probably I will clip this segment and it will disappear once we've reached our goal. But I'll leave this up for a little while here on the YouTube channel that you can check that out. And thanks again. I think one person has already partnered and donated to us, so we really appreciate that. And we're gonna crack on into the Romans 8 discussion without further ado here, talking about being co-workers with God, synergists with God. And I want to do this a little bit backwards in terms of how we're going to continue to discuss this. I want to do the chain part of it, the glorified and all that stuff. And then we can circle back around to foreknown and talk about what I see as 3 different options for provisionists here that generally provisionists hold to when it comes to the idea of God foreknowing people. So let's put this back up here so that we can see it. I'm a visual person. I don't know about you guys, but I like to see stuff. I'm real ADD, so you got to get stuff in front of my face, or it's just not there. Share screen. Here we go.
Can't be worse ADD than I am. I've been at it for 69 years now.
Yeah, but does it get worse? Do I have that to look forward to? It's like,
well, it just depends on how well you work on it.
Yeah, you'll have to send me some tips after the broadcast for how to work on the ADD.
It'll probably get worse once I lose control even more. So. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Okay, here we go. So I'm kind of skipping to verse 20 here, and this is the golden chain aspect of this passage, in verse 30. So it says, and those he predestined, he also called, and those he called, he also justified, and those he justified, he also glorified. So Brother Brian and I would be of the persuasion that all of this happens simultaneously, essentially at conversion. Is that how you would essentially summarize this?
The chain starts in 29. Yeah, this chain starts in 29 with the verse with the word foreknew. But then the rest of the chain is there in 30.
And do you want to talk a little bit about, you had in the side chat there, here, I'll put your comment up, you're dialoguing with someone here. I think it's,
oh no, you don't have to put that out. You don't have to put that out.
Well, it had some scriptures and stuff in here like this. So Paul uses
that
the
is
term
part of go ahead.
Paul used the term called consistently in Romans to designate being named or labeled rather than being invited. Because a lot of people see this as being invited to follow Christ or whatever else. See this clear uses in Romans 1:1, and you got all the citations here.
Yeah, it got cut off. It should be 924 and 926 as well.
Yeah, here you go. So and so if you want to do a word study on that, Brother Brian and I have talked about this particular thing, and I think it's a persuasive argument. We see many are called, but few are chosen, as that being more of an invitation. But then Paul's usage appears to be more of a naming, and you can see that. Let's just jump to a quick usage, which is just in the chapter after this, and I'll put it in the elect sovereign version for our interlocutors that are around. Yes. What's happening here? Why is that not going to Romans 9? Okay, here we go. So this is just one example, to kind of wet your whistle with regards to what we're talking about here with regards to the word called. It's in verse
24, 25, 26. Too often they stop at 24, and then they don't really get.
Yeah, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews, but also from the Gentiles, as indeed he says in Hosea, they were not my people, I will call my people, and her who was not my beloved, I will call beloved. And in that very place where it said to them, you are not my people, they will be called sons of the living God. And so this is the whom he has named. And that word, by the way, what I wanted to highlight was this. Where is it? Where is it?
Verse 11.
No, it has kaleo in it. It's named. It's they're not, some versions say
6.
traced.
Well, counted, verse 8, is a good verse.
Maybe this is it. Maybe is this the, let me just check Blue Letter. Hold on. Because isn't one of them
And
is the
counted is
collect.
present tense. So, you know, the children of promise are being counted. They're being imputed. What's the word I want? As offspring. They're being named, or they're being imputed.
Here we go.
Reckoned. They're being reckoned as offspring. But that's happening in the present.
It's verse
time.
7. This is the example that I wanted. Through Isaac, your offspring being named.
Right.
So this is the same word as in Romans 8, as far as I understand.
Yes.
And so this is a usage that's saying, it's not saying called in the sense of invited, but called in the sense of named. So same context, just a few verses down. The chapter divisions are not inspired. So if that helps you kind of get past the lump of like, this is in a different chapter, Drew. But I just wanted to give a quick.
Well, it's a usage of Paul. Anytime you do word studies, you have to first look at the immediate context. Then you look at how the word is used by the author throughout the rest of the book, and then throughout other books that same author. Instead of just jumping to Gospel of John or something to interpret Paul, that's not good hermeneutics.
Right. So we'll put this back on the screen now, and we'll talk a little bit about the rest of the foreknow thing here. So I'll read it again just for effect. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called or named according to his purpose. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son, so that he will be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. One more comment on verse 30 before we move backwards into verse 29. There's no and then here is one thing that Brother Brian has pointed out in his exegetical dialogue. You can go to your academia page, right, Brother Brian? If you Google academia, Brian Wagner, Romans 8, that'll pop up and you can download it and you can see some of his arguments there. And one of the arguments that I found compelling is that it doesn't say, and then, those he predestined, and then he called them, and those he called, and then he justified them, because it's often seen as sequential. And that's what kind of creates this interpretation that's just sort of, this is a group that's been locked in before creation, full stop. And so most provisionists would reject that. Some might say that they were locked in the sense of that their faith was foreknown, and we'll talk about that momentarily. Now, verse 29. So do you want to talk a little bit about this, Brother Brian? For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son.
Yeah. So we hear the word foreknew or foreknowledge, and we immediately think of a full picture of the future. I have foreknowledge of something that's going to happen in the future, as if it was a video or a picture in my mind, as something already completed. And or something that's happening. Some people have the view that the future is happening right now, simultaneously with the present, and the past is still happening simultaneously. So it's like you can get in a time machine and then you have the conundrum of, well, aren't you changing the future if you show up there?
Sure.
But the problem is, if you use the word foreknow to mean completed, the group then has to be everybody, because God, in that sense, people have that sense that God knows everybody with the word foreknow. So if you say whom he foreknew, you have to get away from the idea of everybody, because not everybody's going to be glorified and not everybody's going to be justified. And all these are past tense verbs. So, whom he foreknew, he predestined, he called, and he justified, glorified. So there has to be a specific group being talked about here. And that's what you try to figure out. And so some say it's a specific group that was chosen before the foundation of the world to be known in a very special way. So you have to change the word foreknow to mean a special kind of knowledge. And then and before creation. And then there's those who say, no, it's a special kind of knowledge where he sees down the corridors of time, everything, how it's going to work out. And then he makes his choices somehow. and that becomes part of his foreknowledge. And then he predestines. So both groups, the pre-creation determinists, and I think the other group is a pre-creation determinist as well. They just have him doing some previewing before he makes the decree. End up with a creation that works out only one way. Where I think the idea, I kind of borrow from the idea that, it does mean loving a special group. It means having a special kind of knowledge.
You would agree. I was going to say you would agree that this is a special knowledge, but your beef
it's
is
not
more
with a story in his head. It's not a story in God's head.
Where does the pre-creation language come from?
Yeah, exactly. It's not in this context. So he does have a special knowledge with certain people, but it's not with a story that was eternally running around in his head that he couldn't get rid of. No, he's creating the story and he's creating these relationships and he's interacting with people that are freely loving him or freely rejecting him. And when he comes into that free commitment of relationship that is eternal, everlasting, then that's when the knowledge.
I like your switch there. You switch from eternal to everlasting.
I did.
To be clear, it's everlasting.
It's eternal. Everlasting.
It's not a static immovable. It's everlasting.
Yeah. That's a theological choice there that I made. And so then he has that relationship that is in the sense of not before in time, but before everybody else. He has a relationship with me that's before everybody else, and he knows me. He knows.
And when you say and when you say before, you don't mean sequentially before, you mean above. You mean like prior, not sequentially, but in terms of priority.
Now, it's an argument that I've developed by looking at when the verb foreknow is used with people. When you say foreknow facts, well, that's prescience. That's knowledge of something that's going to happen in the future. But when you talk about foreknowing people, it's talking about relationship. And you can't have a relationship with people who don't exist. You have to have a relationship with people that exist. So there is the argument among the provisionists, there's a wider group. There are provisionists who say it's a relationship with people from the Old Testament, and they're dead, and so they're already glorified. There's grammatical arguments for that. You could argue that from the grammar. I think contextually, though, he's talking to these people who are called, who love him, and are called according to his purpose. And like you say, he's trying to encourage them during times of suffering. And he's basically saying, hey, if you're foreknown by God, like in Galatians chapter 4, I think it is, Paul says, you've come to know him, or rather be known by him. Intimate knowledge of relationship.
You're really, one thing that I've rubbed up against in studying all of this soteriology stuff is that idea of God knowing us and us belonging to him and so on. You're really going to run into trouble theologically, logically, when you start saying things like you belong to him before you believed, which Paul rejects because he says if you don't have the Spirit of Christ, you don't belong to him. You know, and then Paul says he, you know, the Lord knows those who are his. You're not his before you're following him, before you've trusted in him. And I think that this is a consistent theme throughout Scripture. And so that's kind of this foreknown, we would say, is more of a belonging term and an existing relationship. But there is an argument that can be made for previously known. So Brother Layton is probably the most famous advocate of this in his book, The Potter's Promise, and so on. And so I do kind of wrestle with that a little bit, like how has he moved into the context of the Old Testament saints here? And it's been a while since I've read his book, admittedly.
And I haven't, I haven't quizzed him on this either, because even if you take the Old Testament saints as being what's being discussed, you still have to make a choice of when did that knowledge start with them. So whom he foreknew in the Old Testament, okay, when did he start that for?
Because in that case, and this brings me to so we've highlighted two views already. The one view is our view about this superior prior knowledge. The other view is formerly known, and speaking to the Jewish Old Testament saints. And the other one, Brother Brian kind of alluded to, that I've heard before, is if this is about foreknowledge, God knows everyone. And so this must be that this particular group of people, there's something about them that he knew that was different. And so it's reasonable to infer, if this is talking about those who love God, that that's faith. And so this is the foreknown or foreseen faith view, which Brother Brian was talking about a moment ago. And so with you talking about, it depends on where the knowledge starts. The formerly known Old Testament saints and the foreseen faith kind of start to blend together a little bit, in the sense that, well, if the Old Testament saints' faith was known, you know, prior to creation, then this may as well be a more sweeping, you know, foreknown faith of all of the saints, and so on. And to switch gears a little bit, I feel like sometimes I'm chasing a laser on the wall or something, you know, something popped into my head. But one of the main arguments that I think can be compelling for this view is that glorified is in this chain, right? And so we know that we're not all glorified yet. And so this must mean people that have already gone to be with the Lord, that they're glorified already. However, the scriptures speak in language like this, and the example that you used, Brian, in Ephesians 2:6, I think it is, where we are seated with Christ in the heavenlies. Like that's something that's true about us now. And yet that hasn't happened yet. And so you might be tempted to think of a passage like that, oh, that must be talking about people that are in heaven right now, right? No, but it's true of us. And so this is the same author. So we're trying to do good hermeneutics here. And so he's saying seated with Christ in the heavenlies, glorified. That's very easily true of us, having received the new life of Christ by faith that's living inside of us. There's a sense in which we've been glorified, and there's a sense in which we're waiting to be glorified, which is ultimately what a lot of Romans 8 is about. You know, in Romans 8:23, it talks about how we're eagerly waiting our adoption, which he calls the redemption of our bodies. That's the ultimate glorification. But then the spirit of adoption that he's given us is the down payment for that. That's kind of like the initial glorification that we've received, that now we're waiting on our further glorification.
And we're justified, and we will be justified. I mean, the scripture uses those three tenses for every aspect of our salvation. Or not every aspect, but most aspects of our salvation. So there's a part that we do have now, and then there's a part that will be fulfilled later.
And I'm glad Brother Ben shared this passage. I was posting about this on X just earlier. Because you're sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. And then you can see contextually that Paul says it's by faith that you're a son. And because you're a son, God sends his Spirit. So he's not sending his Spirit into people that are not sons. And if he is sending his Spirit and you think that you were a son prior to faith, then you're disagreeing with Paul. You're going to have an issue agreeing with Paul there.
Yeah,
And
this gets
so,
back to chapter 9, where the word called, we looked at verse 25, 26. You're not his people. That's what it says. He's calling those who are not his people. He's calling those who are not beloved. And so in chapter 8, where we are, he ends with saying, nothing can separate you from the love of God that's in Christ Jesus. So you can't have this conflict of I'm eternally loved by God. Oh, but wait a minute. There's this portion from my birth until my regeneration where I'm unloved by God,
well, and
and
this
now
is,
I'm eternally loved by God again. So you can't have an eternal love take a break at some point.
yeah. Well, and this is one problem that I'm seeing with people be a little bit more logically consistent and according to their beliefs and a little less scripturally consistent. Is I was having a conversation with a brother the other day on X, and his name is Wes. I think it was Wes. I think his name was Wes. And we were talking about this, and I said, so, he put forth this passage in Psalm 8 about God hating workers of iniquity. And there's this idea of a group of people being eternally, immutably loved. And so I kind of asked the question, so are you of the persuasion that you have never been hated? You are never among this group of God that was hated by God as a worker of iniquity. And eventually we went through it, and I pressed and so on, and we got to it. And it was, yes, I'm not part of this group. I'm part of this other group. And I thought that, in terms of a theology and a conviction, what's more humbling and more encouraging and more uplifting? The fact that God's wrath was upon you, you were hated by him because of your iniquity, and now he has called you beloved and brought you into his family, or you're just eternally, immutably loved. God's affections towards you have never changed. And then what do you do with all the passages that talk about God's wrath being upon you, you being a child of
Exactly.
wrath?
Exactly.
It causes problems. So this
By
is
nature, I'm a child of wrath.
yes. And
And
so,
so I ran into somebody, just to tweak this a little bit, my own story. I ran into somebody, because this happens in Reformed theology as well. On the other flip side, they have this cognitive dissonance. You ran into the guy who doesn't want to admit that he was hated at some period in his life. I ran into a guy who wanted to say, there's the wicked and God hates the wicked. And so I asked him, well, have you ever been wicked? And he came up with the answer, I'm still wicked. And I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a minute. So does God love you or hate you? And
right.
he would never come out and say he was hated. But the Reformed theology pushes this, what I call worm theology, where I am so wretched, I'm hated by God. I'm not hated, but I'm evil, I'm wicked. And they identify with the flesh after being born again, which is crazy. We're not supposed to identify with our flesh. Yeah, we have this old man that we keep trying to beat down, but that's not us. We're loved. We're loved by God.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I read a. We'll close here in a few minutes, probably. I think we've covered a lot of the main things here. We've talked about this before regarding what predestined to be conformed to the image of his son means, that's not about being predestined to be saved, but it's about being predestined to the resurrected life. And that firstborn is a word that is encapsulated, is resurrection language. Jesus is the firstborn from among the dead. That's talking about his resurrection life, and that we'll be like him in that. So, yeah. And where was I? See, I just ran after a squirrel, and now I'm trying to figure out.
Well,
where I was.
the foreknew, again, just to throw in another wrench in here, if you do a study of the word foreknew, when it relates to people, Paul uses that in Acts chapter 26, in Romans chapter 11. And to me, those three passages, and this one here, these three, are the only times Paul uses that word. And they are relational. And I think when you study Paul, and I mean really in the Greek, when you study the Greek usage of Paul, it appears that he comes up with theological meanings for words. You read it in commentaries. You'll say, this word's never found anywhere else. It's like, well, I mean, they mean nowhere else, not outside the Bible, not in the Bible. And it's like Paul coins it because he wants to come across with a special meaning. And I think he's done it with this word. Now, this word does appear once in the Old Testament with a relational aspect to it. But every place else, unless you throw in Peter uses the idea of being foreknown of God. And that may be relational as well, but it's interesting.
Yeah. The
priority of relationship instead of just prescience.
Right. And so those are a few different options here that we've talked about with regards to the word foreknown. We've talked a little bit about synergy and being co-workers with God. Another shameless plug. I forgot, but I was going to do like a little banner at the bottom with the link for
you should have.
And I forgot to do that. That's more difficult to edit out in post. So maybe it's better that I didn't do that. But it's if you want to partner with us in what we're doing, if you're just tuning in live, you can go back and listen to it, or you can go to givesendgo.com/toys4 gospel. That should.
Can you add that link in when you put this up in YouTube? Can you add that link?
Yeah, I'll put it in the description so that you guys can find that easily. And if you want to share it on socials, maybe other people would be interested. Maybe some mums. It's something that I think I've become a little bit of a playgroup evangelist because I just think they're fantastic. I've really been blessed by them. They're great. They're a great connecting point.
Yeah, our children opened up so many doors for us when they were little when we were in Ireland. Yeah.
They really do. Yeah. And so that's that. I did want to give another plug. We've got our channel, Eric and I, Provisionist Plays, where we're going to be playing some video games and just horsing around, streaming. You can ask questions, and he's going to be playing a game. I'm going to be playing a different game. That's going to be premiering in about 2 weeks' time. We're hoping to do our first thing. So if you want to go onto YouTube and you type, I think it's on there as Provisionist Plays Live, but just a little quick plug for that. That's going to be coming out soon. Keep your eyes out for that. It's just something fun we thought we would do, kind of casual, and see what happens, see what the Lord does with it. Be blessed. Go be a blessing. And thank you, Brother Brian, for coming on. We appreciate you sharing all this with us and sharing your wisdom. And until next time.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Our pleasure.